Why are we just now starting to do something about the poor performing teachers?
It's a great question. I think I mean, this is, I give politically, I mean, there's nobody better at influencing public debate than the teacher unions have been in the last 30 years. And they've created a scenario where it seems like if you acknowledge that there are bad teachers, then you're anti-union, you're anti-teacher, you're anti-public education. And we've sort of been put in a box. And we're getting to the point right now that we've got, and a lot of it is we've got more data. I think we've got people that have just got more guts, and they've had it. They've said enough is enough. Cities like Cleveland have gone through reform plan after reform plan after reform plan, and the issue of quality teachers, it's still there. And it's still hard to talk about it. It really is. If you're a politician, you don't want to acknowledge that there aren't good teachers out there, even though everybody knows it. And it's a weird tension. As a reporter, when I used to go into a school, I could ask the third grade teacher who the best second grade teacher was in the school. They all know, and within the building, they all know that some teachers are better than others. We're just not allowed to talk about it for a host of complicated reasons. And I think we're getting to a point where we are, and that's what I guess what I mean. Now we've got to do something with it. We've got to make sure we're making the most of the opportunity. It's a great question, though. And by the way, let me just add one quick. I think that having this discussion in the context of rewarding the best teachers is a much easier conversation to have, and I think we'll start to see a lot more of that politically.
So you've talked about your vision of what's your views on what's happening and why it's happening. What's your vision on like what a coherent system would look like if a lot of this change you're talking about happens? Like that doesn't leave a lot of kids behind. That really serves everybody well. What's your vision?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's strong on accountability in terms of it's sort of. I think the charter school movement has taught us a lot about this. You give flexibility to schools to run schools the way they think they need in order to get to a certain level, and then just rock hard accountability on schools on whether they're getting to that level or not. And some of that's going to take calibrating what levels are the right ones to be able to hit. And this gets to the question of charter schools, public schools, private schools. If we get to a point that we can, there's a lot of things we're going to be able to disagree on in this room and in this community, but if we could all agree that we can't tolerate any more bad schools and start with that as a level, and it doesn't really get us to great schools, but it's a lot further than we're at right now. But I think if we can, and this sounds like a pipe dream at times, but really professionalize that teaching force by rewarding the best teachers, recognizing them, making them feel like they are the rock stars that are making this stuff happen, giving school leaders and those teams of teachers the freedom to run their schools in the way that they think is going to work best for their kids, and sort of let them go. And if they can show us that they're getting results on it, we just keep on letting them go. And if they show that they aren't, we have to intervene. And it's just, and this is a knock I would give on the charter school movement. It's done a really lousy job of dealing with its bad charter schools, and it's proved that whether it's a charter school, a public school, or a private school, it's much harder to get rid of bad schools than we ever imagined. And people get really passionate about defending the worst schools in cities at times. But I think some of this sort of gets smoothed over when you've got leaders who are saying enough is enough, no more bad schools.
I'm a physician and founder of the Intergenerational School, a charter school here in Cleveland. We are in the process of a revolution in healthcare as well. I think the best thing we could do for this country is improve public education and the education of the public. I also think the best thing we could do for health is to improve public education and the education of public. So the question is, where do you see the synergies between the redistributions of power and the broader picture of what's happening in this country where we might have better educated kids who are also healthier?
It's a good question. I hadn't thought of it quite like that, but I think you're right. And my honest answer is I'm not sure how that will come to force. But I can say a lot of the supporters that support our organization, we've asked them to become single issue voters, single-issue political activists with education reform there. Do they believe that education is the only issue? Absolutely not. They take the same approach that you just did, that if we can get public education right, there's a whole other host of issues that are going to be a lot easier to solve at that point. And again, it's about highly leveraged. You know, if you believe in fighting for a better society, the bang for the buck is on the schools. I don't know. It's an interesting point that you raise, and I'm not sure how it shakes out.
Mr. Williams, I appreciate that you're a reformer, but I'm kind of looking for a little more meat to the bones here. First of all, do you see the problem as being primarily an urban problem, or is it also a problem in suburban and rural areas, and to what degree? And if it's more broad, the other thing I want to ask about is states are the primary place that fund and regulate education, not the U.S. government. I know they set policy, and what, 7% of the money probably comes from federal government or something like that.
Right.
Where's the real action that's been effective in states already, not that's just trying to go as responding to Race for the Top?
Right.
I happen to have graduated from Delaware schools, and I know it's a small state,
Right.
and I know it can do a lot of things quickly.
Indeed. Indeed. So I don't think it's just an urban issue. I think politically we've got our biggest fight on our hands in urban areas. In terms of trying to loosen the grip that's on education policies. But suburban and rural, it's a real issue. I mean, anybody in this room that's a college professor can tell you there's an awful lot of our best and brightest kids who can't write basic term papers. And I have a friend who's an art history professor who has to spend the first quarter of her semester teaching kids how to write a term paper before they even start getting into the art history. So these are kids who have graduated, the 50% who do make it out of a lot of cities. We were supporting a guy that was running for Congress in New Jersey who was a history professor at Harvard and then at Oxford. And when he got to Oxford, it struck him that the students were so much better than the kids he had at Harvard in terms of their ability to think critically and put their arguments on the paper. So, I mean, look, we're at a point right now that this country is hardly ready for this conversation about the urban education issues. They're certainly not ready to hear about the suburban issues at this point. There's a lot of forces working against them, including the home ownership and the sort of real estate industry. Where I grew up in suburban New Jersey, my entire town was filled with people who moved there from New York City in the 60s and 70s because they wanted their kids to get a better education, and that's why they're willing to pay their property taxes. This community ended up on the failing schools, one of their high schools list under No Child Left Behind because their special ed students weren't making adequate yearly progress, and they didn't want to hear about it. I mean, this is like, it was just treated as an accepted fact that their suburban school community is a great thing. It's one of the reasons that you live there. They didn't want to hear that there was anything wrong with it. So, I mean, it's baby steps in trying to get people to talk about the broader education agenda. Your question about what states have done things well, like Delaware has, but there's just not a lot of great examples to point to, and that's a problem. So you're right. States in most places, well, I guess in every state, it's in the state constitution that the state is responsible for providing the education for the child. Just looking at it from political leverage, usually if you can get city leaders on board to push things, it's an easier way at times to try to get things done. You're right about the federal government also. It's not their role. I think that the federal government does see a role in playing, in sort of setting a new bar and levels for states to try to hit.
Today at the City Club, we have been listening to a Friday Forum featuring Joe Williams, Executive Director of Democrats for Education Reform. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.